Good morning, everyone. This is Ron. It's Saturday morning. Uh, Go ahead and get started with our session here and see if we have any questions. We last spoke on Monday. We talked about a lot of topics, as we usually do when we have questions. And we talk a lot about rest, and someone asked a question about witch and witchcraft and sorcery. Uh, I think Barbara gave us a beautiful answer on the ebbs and flows of using that as an example when discussing rest. So I remember that part. We talked about we were going to discuss at a later time resurrection, looking at resurrection and how that looks to us. What is that to us as we uncover truth and recognize who we are? Uh, we talking about we talked about uh, releasing of life energies that we receive when we at the end of rest, or what rest looks like, and not being talking about a physical thing that the body is in need of, but looking at it from a much deeper perspective. Um, so I think we even touched a little bit on forgiveness and what that looks like. And so we'll go from there. And if there's anything else that needs recapping or bring back to our memory, so please feel free to do so. Okay.
Talked about
Uh,
darkness also.
about darkness, yes, about darkness. So that was yes, and that was
Yeah,
looking at it from John chapter 1. So
yeah.
and all of
I think Kathy has a question about that. Go ahead, Ron.
I'm sorry, Pastor, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Kathy, are you on? Did you
No, no.
want to start off?
Yes, I'm on. I just wanted Pastor to talk a little bit more about darkness not being able to comprehend the light. And so he said he would do a deep dive and maybe talk about that maybe today or at a later time.
Is this a good time, Pastor? You want to hold off a little bit longer, do some research, or
No,
look at that?
I see it, I believe. First of all, we have the word that's used in John, the first, is the same word that's used in Genesis for darkness. And darkness covers deep. Um, Darkness is the same. What I mean by that is this: whether it's confusion or wisdom, both of those are the same. Confusion and wisdom are the same. And the reason confusion and wisdom are the same is because confusion comes when you do not understand wisdom. The wisdom exists there, but your approach to it and whether or not you understand it is determined by your approach. Now, when he talks about uh, and the light comprehended it, and the darkness comprehended it not, speaking of the light, it means that those who are confused do not understand or do not comprehend what light is and do not comprehend uh, the enlightenment itself. To them is confusion as opposed to an understanding of the wisdom. For example, if we were to go into um, congregations that we left and we were to begin talking about we are Elohim, or we talk about um, the marriage of Jesus, we talk about the scriptural and allegory. It does not mean that that is wrong. It means that it's not, I'm sorry. It doesn't mean that we're telling them something wrong. It simply means that they don't understand it because the wisdom of it all is not being understood by them. Therefore, people say things like, well, I'm in the dark on that. That means that they don't understand it. Does that make sense, Kathy?
It does. And when I'm thinking about darkness too, Pastor, we've also talked about darkness being the womb, a dark place. So when we're looking at things being birthed out of that darkness, that's what I'm kind of trying to understand. Basically, darkness not comprehending light. You understand what I'm asking?
I do. I do. See, what happens is um, the womb is dark because it's birthing something. The womb births two things. The womb, there's a spiritual womb that births spiritual understandings of the wisdom, and the dark womb also births brings into this earth life itself in the form of a body. The body comes from that dark place, that place of wisdom, and it is infused with spirit as it exits when it exits the womb. So, and even to this day, to explain it explicitly, how how a seed and an egg ends up being a human being, the whole process of that is not totally understood because there are indeed spiritual aspects of it that is not comprehended by the mind. It is embraced spiritually. Does that help, Kat?
It does. Thank you.
Any questions about that from anyone else?
So what you're basically
Go ahead, babe.
sorry.
Go ahead.
This is Barbara. Good morning. What it sounds like to me, what you're basically saying also is that the root is the same. All of our discussion about duality and things like that is the way we perceive things in this material world. But the root of everything is based in the same. And so, as you said earlier, it's our perception, our interpretation of it that sheds light on it. And so it would behoove us, if we know that truth, is to perceive things from the enlightened perspective rather than choose to perceive it from darkness or from a perspective of ignorance, a perspective of not knowing. Once we know the truth of it, then it's our responsibility to experience that truth as we experience these dualities, these seeming dualities.
Absolutely.
So, good morning. This is Audrey. So that brings me to the question of, are the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil one tree, same tree?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If you don't have the opportunity to be dysfunctional, you don't know what functionality is. Also, it gives us opportunity to have free will. I think I heard someone else about to speak as well.
Well, it's Ron. I was going to. I was just going to speak from the perspective of the wisdom. We look at, you talked about the darkness. There is a relationship between wisdom and understanding, and it's almost, as you will, like a dance, if you can picture two lovers becoming one. Understanding is the other side of wisdom. In other words, it's a yielding thing. you yield to your lover to become one. There is something that you have to give up, and the giving up is your ignorance. The giving up is your pride and your lack of understanding. So if you are to comprehend it, you give up who you previously are, and you become the wisdom. You become the enlightenment of what it is. So that you mentioned, the egg and the seed becoming human, and the parts of that we don't understand. We are at a place now that we understood more than we did 6 months ago, and even a year ago. And as we yield, as we recognize that, we become the wisdom. The wisdom and understanding become one, and you don't know where one starts and one begins, or where one ends, excuse me. So that, to me, is not only an individual thing, it is a desire that one must have to be able to see there is a more, and a desire to get there. So I just want to bring that up. I think wisdom and understanding becomes one and the same based on your desire. Thank you.
I agree with that, but Audrey, did that help you?
Yes, but I don't quite know what to think or ask about it further. So you were saying something about free will. Can you elaborate on that again?
Yes. If there is if there's no diametric, then there is no free will. If when we talk about the tree of life, good and evil, we are it, and that is what determines our free will. For an example, we can make a choice between being functional, which means that searching for who we are and living accordingly, or we can remain dysfunctional, meaning that we go through all of these ordeals and we don't know the reason why we are going through them, and we keep blaming someone else as opposed to searching within for why we go through them. Now, I'll give an example of free will. I gave up my free will years ago, which means that I rendered something to the Creator that I did not have to do. And the reason I did it is because I didn't know what to do with it. So that was a choice that I made. And that choice that I made is based upon whether or not I wanted to be functional or dysfunctional. Does that make sense, Audrey?
Yeah. I still have a question in general of how do we know we're plucking leaves from the tree of life versus the tree of knowledge of good and evil? I mean, or we don't. How do we know which side we're on? Or we don't. We just we don't really know which side we're on, except that I'm talking about in terms of whether it's the tree of life or the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But so you're saying we make the choice based on our own free will.
Yes. We make that choice based on our own free will. Now, when I first did that, I had no idea what was happening. All I knew is that I felt driven to give up that free will because I was trying so hard to understand what the scripture was saying. And I could not find anything at that time that would help me to understand it. So giving up the free, I'm like, I give up. I give up my free will. And I did that during that period through prayer because I knew. And it was taken away from me because I didn't know what to do with it. But I was willing to do whatever it takes in order for me to be able to understand so I could teach people who they are or teach people what the scriptures are really saying. Does that help?
Okay, so we find out through our own journey of discovering who we are.
Yes, and that's a decision that you have to make as an individual, whether or not you're gonna give up your free will. I remember saying I had given up my free will and said to others, if you desire to do so, do it. But honestly, at that period, I was the only one who gave it up because the rest of them were like, oh, I don't know about that. But eventually it happened.
It's also, we know where we are also based on our motives, our intent, and our desire. And we understand where we are when our motive, intent, and desire is not for us alone, for ourselves, for our own selfish egos, for our own selfish wants. When we understand that we are not isolated, but we are one with everything, then our motives, our intent, and our desire changes. And everything that we desire is for the good of humanity, for the good of the earth, for the good of where we live, for the good of the universe. It's beyond us. So that's one way of knowing where you are in terms of the tree of functionality and dysfunctionality, or the tree of life and the tree of knowledge and evil.
I agree with that. I think
that makes sense.
I was just going to say, yeah, I just want to add to what Barbara said. I think the other one is we say on the phone all the time, even if we don't voice it, we'll say that resonates with me, or I that intuitiveness that we have in it that aids and works with our desire. I think is also an indicator that we sometimes either take for granted or don't think about it as much. But that feeling of you can read something or you hear something said here, and you agree with, you may not be able to repeat it or explain it to somebody else, but it touched something inside of you, and that too kind of helps you to navigate, to me, to say that I'm going in the right direction.
See,
yeah, makes sense.
There is a knowing in all of us when we are moving in the right direction. We call it, it resonates with us, that's what we say, but more times than not, we don't say that, we just experience it. It's like I was reading an article about birds and their migration habits. And one of the meteorologists was talking about how these birds would migrate from the Northeast to South America. And they would do it depending on whether or not there's going to be active hurricane season. If it's going to be a real active hurricane season, they would migrate earlier. They would end their nesting earlier. They would end their procreation earlier. If it was going to be a light hurricane season, then they waited longer before they would migrate. And they have been watching these birds for years, and they're trying to understand, how do they know this? So there's a knowing in everything in this earth that breathes. And that knowing is what guides us. And when we are in search of an understanding about who we are, that knowing is the thing that really speaks to us loudly, yet is silent within. Does that make sense? I'm done.
Any other questions on darkness? Anyone comments? Okay, I want to switch gears just for a minute and take another look at forgiveness. I was texted a question I want to ask the pastor and the rest of the class about forgiveness. And hold on a second here, and I'll read it to you, and we'll go from there, okay? It says, if you have forgiven someone who has committed a crime, yet you must testify against them, like Mother Emanuel Church, does that mean that you have truly forgiven them? Does forgiveness mean that there is no consequences for the offender? Also, when testifying, if asked about the death penalty, should you agree to it? That is a question, or several questions rather, that were sent to me. Class?
First of all, if when you forgive someone, it does not mean that you won't tell the truth about what happened. So in testifying against them, it does not mean you did not forgive them. You're simply giving an account of what happened. And what was the second part of that? Oh, the death penalty. That's a decision that we should make based upon what forgiveness is. For example, when I spoke about Mitch McConnell and losing his power and going home and having no influence whatsoever, and the depth of suffering that he would go through because of that, my whole thing was, I don't want him to suffer. I'd rather him transition than to suffer. So I feel the same way about Dylan Roof. Rather than suffer through the prison, I'd rather him transition than to have to suffer through that. Why? Because there is a difference between prosecution and persecution. But more importantly than that, I am not a prosecutor and I'm not a persecutor. I am a redeemer. So my goal is redemption. And whatever it takes to redeem, that's what I choose. And I do believe to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. It's simply saying that you are redeemed faster when you transition than you would be going through suffering. It is not my desire that anyone would suffer, but that all would be redeemed. Does that make sense? Or does that help? I should ask maybe. Anyone want to add to that?
It helps. Yet there are folk who are not ready to make a decision, and whatever the consequences of what they did, even if they don't transition immediately, it may take that space of time for them to reach the point of discovery of who they are. So that can work both ways. It doesn't mean that I am supportive of suffering. I am just simply saying that it may be that being in prison for someone who's done some heinous crimes may give them that opportunity and that space and that time to learn that.
Yes.
Yeah, well said. Anyone else? Okay.
Well, I was It's interesting that, wasn't that thing with Mitch McConnell, didn't that happen this week?
What do you mean?
That he froze up when he was giving his remarks?
Oh yeah, that happened last week, yeah.
Okay. Well, last week or this past week?
My day is so mixed up, it probably was this week.
Okay.
I think it
All
was
right.
last week, Pastor. On the news, we saw it last week.
Okay.
Okay.
Audrey, are you going to tie that into?
No, I just thought it happened after what Pastor had said,
Okay.
but I'm not sure now.
Okay.
And at the same time, we've got Dianne Feinstein, who is older and also has some limitations now, the same as a McConnell. And so I guess my question is there something general going on that says that, okay, you have a certain appointed time to do whatever it is you're going to do, and then it's time to step down and let some other folk do what they need to do.
I think we've said this on more than one occasion, that old guard is starting to fall apart, start to come down. And that is one of the reasons anyway we do what we do, the importance of it. And even, thinking about this conversation and looking at forgiveness, one of the things you have to consider is when we think about forgiveness, we think about the offender, and I'm forgiving the offender. What does that do for that person doing the forgiving? That is a freeing thing for them as well. So as we look at who we are and speak on forgiveness and understand it and put it out there, that frees up the land, that frees up everybody. It has an effect on all of mankind. So I think that's part of what we're seeing and witnessing, because we never stop to think of how these things will look. They're happening before our eyes, and it's just different than anything I guess we've ever considered. But I think it's also a part of what we're doing now.
When you talked about wisdom and understanding, and there's sort of like a dance between them, that something has to go by the wayside, has to be given up, has to be pushed aside from you in the plural. The same thing is with forgiveness. Forgiveness not only frees the other person, but it frees up space within you. And I don't mean space in a general way, but it frees up that space within you so that you can receive grace. You can receive wisdom. You can receive everything that you need to continue functioning as you should as Elohim. But when you hold on to that forgiveness, it's like stored negative energy. And the question is, when we are Elohim, why would we continue to store and hold on to that negative energy? Can we be Elohim and averse to being Elohim at the same time? Question is it a process, or are we Elohim or are we not? Because if we're Elohim, we cannot afford to store that stored energy, that stored negative energy. We have to let it go. So that forgiveness is good not only for the other person, but it's very good for us individually and for mankind.
Yeah.
And storing that unforgiveness actually causes us to be dysfunctional. And now, and so when we embrace the reality that we are Elohim, there are things that cross our pathway that we don't deal with properly. But the moment you recognize that you're not dealing with it properly, that's when everything changes. Why? Because it is the divinity that shows you that you're not handling it properly. And if you don't know what to do, that is the reason we are our brother's keeper. We are the keepers of each other. So we can make a phone call to talk through it. And when I say that, I'm not exempting anyone, because I would tell you quickly that I have recently had to make phone calls to deal with things that I was not approaching properly. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's someone else that you have done something to or said something to or they to you. There are times when it happens to you. I was in a dark place. I needed to get out of that place. And in order for me to get out of that dark place, I had to talk with someone to help guide me from that dark place. That simply means that I recognized that I was in a place of confusion, and the wisdom as to how to pull me from that space was not visible to me. It was available, but not visible to me. It was visible to someone else who helped pull me through it. Does that make sense?
It does. I have a question. So when you forgive someone and you truly made it from your heart, and you forget about that person offended you in a particular way, what does that mean for you? Does it mean that you risen above the situation, or what does that mean?
Two things. There is no such thing as sincerely forgiving.
Okay.
You either forgive or you don't.
Okay.
That's it.
Right.
And what does it do for you? It allows you to bring that person to a state of restoration if they choose to. It also brings you to a state of restoration. It takes you to beginning, meaning that a place where you have opportunity to start over again. Start over again from what? From the pain that you encountered during that ordeal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the reason why I said that, because the people who, I'll use the word, rejected me for that position I applied for, it's like, when I see them, I'm okay. It's like, I forgot what they did to me at the agency. So, and now with the person who they chose for the position, I'm helping them. And if we have a meeting or something, when he make a statement or if he say something, he look directly at me. And I'll do this to let him know. I'll nod my head, I'm fine with it.
See, that's leadership. That's being in a position for that pay. That also speaks volumes. How do we know we are willing to forgive regardless of what the infraction is, unless we are put in a space where that infraction is something that we would have raised holy hell about before we understood what forgiveness really is? How would we know that forgiveness with the depth of forgiveness with the people whose loved ones were slaughtered and executed, really, in Charleston. They're in that position, and now they forgive. So forgiveness is not an option. If you don't forgive, a room will not forgive you. The universe will not forgive you. You will stay in that state of unforgiveness. So it also reinforces to you your relationship with the universe and reinforces your understanding of who you are. Because it is impossible for you to be Elohim and not forgive. That's an impossibility. So there is about an ebb and flow to that in terms of growing to the place where you truly embrace who you are. And do you really know exactly, do you really know who you are unless there are periods in your life when that is, tested is a bad word, not the word I want to use, let me put it that way. During the course of your life, when things are not brought to the forefront to help you to see who you are, a mirror is not always something that you look at that pertains to you. The mirror is also good for you sometimes when it doesn't look so good to you, because you can see what you need to deal with, as well as you can see the forgiveness that you are. All of the principles that we talk about, whether they are wisdom, light, forgiveness, loving kindness, that is not what we do. That's who we are. And if you have to consider forgiving someone, then have you truly embraced that you are Elohim? I'm done.
Greetings, everyone. This is Sheldon. Pastor Richard did a beautiful job of describing that just now. Last week, it came upon me after we met when we were talking about judgment and forgiveness. And the other side of another way of looking at that is, as we forgive people, we essentially are extending them grace. And as we extend grace to others, we extend grace to ourselves as well. And at the end, when you said we are loveness and kindness, as we extend that grace, as we extend that love and that kindness, we experience more and operate more in the love and kindness within ourselves. So it's as if we allow that love and kindness to, not only are we extending it in a sense, we're illuminating that in ourselves and experiencing that in our personal lives as well. Evelyn, when you was explaining about the people who passed you over, and for you to extend that grace to them, something else that is another way of looking at also what was actually taking place is both psychologically and emotionally, you freed yourself from being a prisoner, if you will, of that particular thing that they did to you. So in the same sense, when we talk about it as a two-way street, and Ron asked a little while ago, what does it do for the person who is forgiving? As you free them in another way, you are also freeing yourself from that particular situation. You automatically rise above it, and now that situation no longer defines you. It does not define your experience, etc. because you have extended grace to them, you can actually go into to the office pleasantly, if I will, in terms of enjoying your day or going about your day, and it not being an experience of total bitterness and turmoil. You, in a sense, also have turned the page on that particular situation. And it doesn't matter where they may be, in a sense, you're, even if they stay there, you're not engaging in that yourself. I'm finished.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Good discussion. And hopefully a better understanding of forgiveness. And if not, we'll keep talking about it.
I had a thought, Ron, as the show finished up about forgiveness when you talked about it freeing you in a sense. Giving, that the giving part of forgiveness is that grace part, that part that whatever the infraction against you, when you give grace, you give peace, you give love, that's what's sent out to the universe. That's what resonates. And that's what not only you have opportunity, not only the individual or individuals who committed the infraction have an opportunity to avail themselves of, but you have that opportunity as well as other people who might be in similar circumstances, who choose to hear the resonance and the vibration of the universe, that part that you've sent out, that you've given to the universe, to also be partakers of that as well.
That's what that's an inheritance to the Lord. The scripture in, I think it's 1 Samuel, that about witchcraft that someone brought up last week when I was talking about it, and he talked about
Pastor.
Yeah.
Can I read that verse first? If you're going to talk about the inheritance,
Yes.
can I read and let you tie that in?
Yes.
Please, sir. There was a verse here that kind of I did not quite understand, and I was asking Pastor about it. I guess what Barb just said just kind of reminded him of. I'm going to read this verse. It said, "Then Samuel took the flask of oil and poured it on his head," talking about Saul. "He kissed him and said, 'Has not the Lord appointed you a ruler over his inheritance?'" And that's the part I didn't understand. What is the inheritance of the Lord? Who gives the Lord an inheritance? So, sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead and proceed if you don't mind.
When Barbara was talking about what we give to the universe or render to the universe, and I said that's the inheritance of the Lord. Life is an investment, and we have been vested with life, and that investment came from Yahweh Elohim. So we are an investment, and when we die to self and embrace the reality of who we are, then that is what's inherited by the one who created us. We become its inheritance. We become, and the reason I say we become its inheritance is because the energy of our Creator begins to take charge over us. It begins to take possession of us. And the us of whom I speak is all who have embraced the reality of who they are. It doesn't mean that the people who don't know who they are, it doesn't mean that the Creator doesn't care about them. It means that they don't know who they are. And it is no different than you saying to your child, remember who you are. If that child does not remember who you raised them to be, and they do everything contrary, then are they who you expected them to be or raised them to be? No. So if you caught up in religion or not, and you don't know who you are, you're in a space that was not intended for you to be in. However, when you get into that space where you recognize who you are, you embrace that, that is the inheritance of Yahweh Elohim. That's what I am saying. Because you become one with. Let me give you a possible example of what I'm talking about. I read about this glass in the desert, and with a few augmentations to it, I would like to make an effort to explain to you what I'm talking about when I talk about the inheritance and how you become that. Okay? A glass sits in the desert full of water, and it has the same elements as the ocean does, as well as the water that's in the clouds. But you cannot sail a ship through that glass of water. You cannot expect fish to swim and live in that glass of water. However, when that glass of water, when that water in that glass evaporates, it leaves the glass, but it evaporates. And it becomes one with all the water on earth. I can see that. So when you embrace who you are, when you die to self, it is no different than the water evaporating from that glass. That glass is left in the desert, but that water becomes one. And when we become one with the universe, the body is here, but you understand that you are in this world, but you're not of it, because now you are one with the one who created you. And your body becomes less important to you. Humanity becomes most important to you, because you have an inheritance also. And when you are one with the Creator, when you are one with Yahweh Elohim, and you bring somebody to an understanding of who they are, that is also your inheritance. Does that make sense? Can you see that?
Yes.
So we are inheritors in more than one way. We've inherited this investment of life. And what we do with it determines whether or not we are inheritors with the one who created us. I'm done, I think. Any questions or comments?
When you talked about the glass and the water, it also reminded me of what we talked about recently and what you just mentioned earlier, the ebb and flow of things. The water has its purpose in different forms. And for the material, the water, for me in a physical body, the water is good for the physical body. But it has its duty and its purpose and its functionality in different ways, whether it's the water, whether it's ice, or whether it's the steam. If it's functional, it's good in all of its forms. And so even when it evaporates, and that's the ultimate of the representing unicity, even when it evaporates, it becomes available again for so many others. So I just see the ebb and flow, the motion and rest in everything that you're talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was good discussion. Anyone else? I'm sorry, did I interrupt someone?
I have a question. So the inheritance is what again, Pastor Jay?
Huh?
The inheritance. We were taught that inheritance means finances or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me again, what is inheritance?
When I'm talking about inheritance, I'm talking about when I speak to rather the inheritance of Yahweh. When I speak to that, I'm talking about what is it that Yahweh inherits. It inherits the life that it has. It inherits what it has invested in. It has invested life in us, and the inheritance is when we become one with it, not he. Not she, with it, the creator. That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
See, we are so caught up on material inheritance until we lose sight of what spiritual inheritance looks like. And the wisdom of inheritance is not understood by the material mind, but it is embraced and understood and explained from the depth of the soul, because the soul is never separated from its creator. It is always one with its creator. The mind is what gives us free will to make choices, whether or not we're going to pursue the journey of understanding who we are, or whether or not we just go settle and all reality is what we see with our eyes rather than what we experience with our eye. And when reality is all you see with your eyes, then you are living in a world of illusion. You are existing in a world of illusions, because all of it is temporal. Here today, gone tomorrow. The experiences with the eye are always there, always. So how does above become, how does below become as above is? It becomes that individually and collectively. It becomes that individually when your soul becomes one with your mind. When your soul is processing everything that flows through your mind, as opposed to your mind blocking your soul and processing everything it hears with the ears or sees with the eyes. So when that takes place, when you are as above, then we have opportunity to usher into this earth reality, into this earth consciousness, the essence of what above looks like, the experience of what above looks like, and that is harmony. The harmony you have to be harmonious with yourself before you can be harmonious with others. That's why we say misery loves company. You have to be harmonious with yourself. And when you are harmonious with yourself and when you're harmonious with others, now, as Bob was talking about what we present to the universe in terms of love and kindness, forgiveness, etc. Now, being harmonious collectively means that we are not sitting in different places. We are not putting anything in the macro. We are the macro. We're not in the macro, we are it. Because we are the spiritual consciousness that's reshaping the consciousness in this material world. But that doesn't happen until you are harmonious with you. Any questions or comments about that?
Reb, good morning, everyone, and I'm a little tardy to the lesson. Reb, you said many moons ago that sacrifice is not about what you're going to give up or what you're giving up. Sacrifice is about what you will inherit. Could you bridge that, if you don't mind, of what you just not said? Because the inheritance part to me is not tricky, but yet I don't know what I'm inheriting. I just know I'm doing what I think to be is righteous. Could you tie that in, and it doesn't have to be Reverend Rich, it can be anyone. Yet, could someone just tie that in for me, if you don't mind?
To sacrifice. Sacrifice is not giving up anything. Sacrifice is receiving everything. Sacrifice simply removes everything that is antithetical to you receiving an understanding about who you are. Sacrifice is removing those the roadblocks that keeps you from seeing who you are. So you're not giving up anything. You're removing everything so you can gain everything. Does that make sense? Yes. So that was the second part there, George. I just slipped my mind. Hello, can you repeat what you said? Or someone repeat the second part?
Oh, forgive me. I was just asking, could you just bridge that in between what you just said and what you said many moons ago about sacrifice is not about what you will inherit, not about what you give up, yet it is about what you will inherit. And I think you answered it. Thank you.
I want to add something to that for clarity, greater clarity, hopefully. You have already inherited life. All of us have inherited life. The investment in these bodies is life. So what are you going to do with what you've been invested with, that you've invested with? What are you going to do with it? Are you going to spend it on frivolous things? Are you going to spend it manipulating people to get more money? Are you going to spend it in religious settings, misguiding people? Or are you going to spend it, or are you going to spend it or expand it by virtue of embracing who you are so that you can bring other people to understand that the same creator that invested in you invested in them as well, and they have the same opportunity that you do to see who they are. This is not about me running the show. This is not about me being out front and telling you what to do. This is about all of us showing each other who we are, not what we to do, but who we are. Because when we embrace who we are, what we do with that is up to us. I can't tell you what to do with that, but I do know this. If you embrace who you are, your life changes immensely. There's a great shift that you experience when you are able to embrace that reality. So one of the other things I want us to make every effort to do is to cease referencing Elohim, Yahweh as he. It's an it. It's not a he. It's an it. It's not a she. It's an it. And so and the it of it is spirituality. That's the it of it. When we talk about a person, we are talking about something that's and we're talking about a physical body that's representative of that name that has been attached to that person. When we talk about personality, that personality is influenced by the creator or is influenced by the material world, or both. And you have to get to a place where you are influenced primarily by the spiritual essence of your being, which means that you are influenced by your soul. The renewing of your mind is talking about the soul bringing your mind to a place where it sees something that it has never seen before. And it struggles with it because we say things like, it's difficult for me to wrap my mind around it. We must understand that we are not wrapping our mind around anything. We are changing our mind. We are unwrapping our mind. We are renewing our mind. We're bringing our mind into a unicity with our soul, with the soul being the influencing force to our mind, so that when our mind is engaged, our mind will lead us to do the right thing, the righteous thing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I have a question.
Just a moment, please. George, does that help? Anyone else as well? Premier has a question, but I want to see if this is clear, George.
Yes, sir. Crystal clear.
Thank you.
Would you just explain to us about inheritance? What was explained just now about inheritance, is that analogous to the story of the talents? We have to make a choice whether we want to bury the life that we've inherited or whether we want it to flourish. That's my question.
Okay. There's a difference. The three who buried what they had received knew what they had received. And they buried it rather than expand it. Most people don't know what they have received. None of us, whether it be the 13 of us or everyone on this phone, or Zoom, or everyone on this earth who do what we do, none of us knew what we had or were given. We didn't know that until we start searching for God, knowing that when we see God, it would not look like God, the God that we were looking for. So we didn't know. Now we know. So the question is, are you going to bury what you know? Are you going to do it? Are you going to sit there and argue with someone, even though you're right, and call them names? Are you going to go home and talk about somebody behind their back? Are you going to bury it beneath all the filth? And are you going to bury it beneath all the negativity that was brought up in the first place? What are you going to do with it? Are you going to utilize it? Are you going to invest it in others so it can grow? Your light comes by giving light. Your light does not come by covering it with a bushel basket. So what are you going to do with it? Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Any questions about that?
Me too.
See, all decisions are based upon our choices. And just like our journey started in the material world, because that's all we knew, our journey continues with choices that we make. And in the beginning of the journey, all you know is that something is missing. All you know is that there's more to this. I just don't know what the more is. And then once you know that there's more to it, the question becomes, are you going to listen to those who see the more? It resonates with you, but it's not popular. One of the major reasons that people reject light or enlightenment or truth is because it is not popular. Popularity is what gets you preaching engagements. Popularity is what gets you noticed in meetings and conventions and conferences and stuff. Popularity does that. I know popular preachers who didn't know who Jesus is. They preached him every Sunday, and they were able to do that, but they didn't know. So it's all, quite frankly, regardless of what denomination or you're dealing with, regardless of what religion you are attached to, all of it is about popularity. You become a leader because you're popular. I never shall forget that when I went to this particular church as pastor, someone said to me, you're smart, but they really wanted you because you're easy on the eye. And my response was, you know what the rest of that is. And all of a sudden, I wasn't easy on the eyes anymore because you didn't like what I was saying. So what I'm saying in essence is this: popularity, intellect, all these things are the things that people see you for. That's what they see. But when you show them who you are, they get uncomfortable because they want to embrace the popular one, not the light itself. And we have to be cautious of that. We have to recognize that it is not your intellect. If you really look at the Pharisees and their writings, if you look at the Pharisees, what you will find, that word in Aramaic means the intellectual. The Pharisees were intellectuals who read the scrolls and advised the priests. So that is one of the reasons that they could not deal with Jesus, because Jesus did not present himself as an intellectual. Jesus said, "Is it not written that I say that you're God?" They couldn't handle that because they were processing with their minds, and Jesus was processing with his soul. And he started processing with his soul at an early age, even though he didn't know what he was doing. But he did it. So what am I saying to you? It is uncomfortable for others, and sometimes for you, when you start processing with your soul instead of your mind. Because when you process with your soul, you get in the midst of circumstances where you are determined that I'm not going to speak because I don't want to be controversial. And the question comes to you. And you're sitting there trying to hold your peace, but your peace won't let you be still. And your tongue starts wagging, and you're speaking. And those who asked the question did not really want the answer because they're uncomfortable. Now, what am I saying? The thing that makes you uncomfortable is not what I said. The thing that makes you uncomfortable is you have to make a choice based on what I said. That's where the discomfort comes. You have to make a choice. You know it resonates. You know it's real. But you can't wrap your mind around it when it's never meant for you to wrap your mind around it. It's a spark. It is to ignite your soul so it can become a flame again. Does that make sense? And since we own this flame thing, since I mentioned it, suppose for a moment that the garden called Eden, the garden east of Eden rather, suppose for a moment when that flaming sword was put there, that's your soul. Suppose that God is your soul, and the protection for it is that flaming sword, and whatever whatever comes through your mind, you process through your mind, you hear with your ears and process it in a material way. The flaming sword is there because it will not allow those material religious attributes to affect the soul. And when you begin to try to make every effort to understand what's being said, understand what the scriptures are saying, it is at that point that that flaming sword begins to divide the word. It cuts right and left, meaning that it is a two-edged sword that rightly divides the truth, separates it from what the truth, or what you've been told the truth is, as opposed to what the truth is. And when that happens, that's when you say it resonates, because it's in your soul. It's simply, resignation is simply your soul being it is your soul letting you know that you already knew it. When something resonates, it's like, oh, I knew that, but I didn't know I knew that. It makes sense.
So it brings it to your remembrance?
Yes. And that's the process that begins the renewing of the mind. The question is, are you going to bury it? Or are you going to follow it? I'm done.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I don't know about anybody else, but for me, this whole lesson is just vibrating and resonating very deeply. So I appreciate all of the discussion, all of the questions. Thanks so very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pastor,
Anyone else?
Yeah, I was sitting here smiling at Pastor because Ron and everybody else who used who used to follow Pastor when he would go teaching in all these other places. I remember a lot of times I could see them, they was just smiling when he first come on the pulpit and everything. And then after he started teaching, they started getting uncomfortable. You could just see them moving. They couldn't sit still in their seat because at that time when he started teaching, they didn't like what he was saying. It didn't sit well with them. So, and a lot of times I think he said he would tell somebody to start the car just in case. You know that, Pastor Jacob? So, yeah, popular, it's something you have to deal with, but it's worth it. Or being unpopular.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, Jesus did not teach a popular message. And if you're teaching a popular message, you will not get crucified. And without crucifixion, there is no resurrection. If you preach a popular message, you get others crucified. And that from the crucifixion comes resurrection, meaning that the truth of your soul begins to reveal to your mind more of what it is. And when you start talking, and when you start teaching, and you start contemplating, or you start meditating, you begin to see things, experience, and say things that you've never heard before in your ears, but your soul is speaking. And you're not speaking from the body. You are speaking from the spiritual realm, meaning that you are speaking from that place that your body resides in. Your body resides in you, and you're speaking from the real you. And you're speaking from the academic you. You're not speaking from the material world that influences your mind. Now you are influencing the material world because you're speaking from your soul. And it is impossible for you to speak from the depth of your soul, and it does not resonate throughout the universe. That's impossible. Because when you're speaking from your soul and it resonates throughout the universe, it means that not only are you in balance, but the rhythm is the same. And when you change the rhythm by virtue of your speaking, what you're doing is exercising and showing what it looks like, feels like, and here's what it hears when you are speaking from your soul. There's unicity with the universe. When you are speaking from your soul, that vibration, that rhythm is one with the universe. And what happens? Every word that you have ever spoken is still out there. It's just that the sound waves are further apart. So when it resonates that deeply, it's out there, meaning that it travels throughout the spiritual realm. And those who are searching and for truth and looking for the more that they know is there, but they can't find, these things begin to resonate with them and they manifest in different ways. That's who we are. We don't have rhythm, we are rhythm. Think about that. You cannot be the universe and the universe be you if you don't have rhythm. You have to be in rhythm with the universe in order to be who you were created to be. Nothing else matters because everything else is temporal. Everything.
Scientists have said that they hear a hum in the universe. Now, it doesn't mean that it hadn't always been there. It's just that they're now just hearing it. And so even the universe is reflective of this resonance. It's being shown, even though they may not understand it. They are able to identify it and hear it now.
You said that. Have you not heard this before? The reason we hum is because the devil won't know what we're talking about.
Yes, yes, yes.
What are we saying? We harming with the universe. And when we are harming in rhythm with the universe, the adversary of thoughts, the adversary who carries those adversarial thoughts, don't know what we're talking about. I feel something deep inside that I cannot explain. That's why I hum. I don't have words to put to it, but I hum because I feel something. And the something that you're experiencing is that unicity that you have with the universe. I feel something. Meaning, and in spiritual terms, I'm experiencing something that I don't experience when I'm singing with words. When I am using lyrics. I don't feel the same thing as I feel when I'm like, I feel I'm experiencing something different in the depths of my soul. Because if you think about it, if you ever hum, it does not come from your mind, it comes from internal. Now, it comes from your belly. It comes from that place where your soul resides. It comes from the place that the Eastern mindset says is the home for the heart. That's where it comes from. And that's that rhythmic experience that we have with the universe.
Pastor, you're right. In church, we would sing lyrics, we would sing everything. But the moment, and this was without music, because I grew up in the old church setting. When we started humming, I mean, it was just everything just changed. I mean, like you said, the devil, they would tell us the devil didn't know what you're talking about. So we would just hum. And there was a harmony, a balance. Didn't know what it was at that time, but now that you talk about it,
you can still experience it. Even just talking about it.
Yeah.
If you've been there, experience it right now. But anyway, I'm done. Unless there are questions or comments.
Rev, quick question for you or to the group as it relates to humming. It's been a long time since I've actually seen an African American male whistle. What I mean by whistle, I mean can whistle that song by Otis Redding, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, or whistle any song. Does whistling have the same effect as humming, or is that something totally different?
Wisdom, I'm sorry, whistling is a dying art. Whistling puts us in rhythm with the material world. If you think about whistling, you don't have the same experience with whistling as you have with humming. Experience is different. Well, everybody whistles. But like I said, it's a dying art. And so the essence, would you unmute your phone, please? The essence of what Bible was interjected about the harmony of the universe, the essence of that triggered to revisit from when I was a little boy at a different set at church, but not only at church. When the clothes were being washed, or when the clothes were being ironed, or when someone was cooking, and you walk in there and into the kitchen and you hear that low harmony, and the food tastes different because the energy is in the food, and the energy that's in it comes from you. So all of those things are played in. Oh my God! Let me carry it a little bit further. Without the African could not have survived in this country without home. It had to be in unison, or in a position of unison in order to survive. Otherwise, we would not be here. Would you please mute your phone? Thank you. Otherwise, not be here if it were not for the home. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you meant wash yourself.
You washing what?
No.
Somebody
I'm sure it was dirty.
the whole conversation.
Please mute your phone. I can't hear. Please mute your phones. Please.
Thank you. So our very survival was predicated on harmony. Some call it mourning.
Some call it what?
Mourning. When you moan.
Moaning? Okay.
I'm done. Are there questions, comments?
Good discussion. Good discussion. I think this is a good place to pause. Not quite 11:30, but close enough. And of course, you guys know we don't go by time, but just seems like a good place. A lot has been said. We've gone in depth looking at forgiveness, at rest, talk about ebb and flows again, and darkness, and a number of other things. So a lot to consider. And please remember when you meditate on your resting. And again, I want to thank you and encourage the questions. And again, if you care to, you can write them down or text them, and we will deal with them. Okay? But thank you. I hope everybody has a great day, and look forward to tomorrow morning. Thank you, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.